Spirit Airlines is one of the most notorious airlines in North America. In 2020, they still managed to be the 8th largest passenger carrier in the region, servicing the United States, the Caribbean, and Latin America. Despite their terrible reputation, people seem to still keep coming back. I mean, for a $100 flight from Washington, D.C. to Miami, you would probably come back too. These ultra-low flight prices have managed to generate billions in revenue over the years, but in the recent years, they've begun seeing a drastic decline in profits. So buckle your seatbelts and put your phone on airplane mode as we dive into our next episode of why the world dreads flying Spirit. Spirit Airlines, and having a bad reputation, or I may even go as far as to say being one of the most hated airlines out there, are like peas in a pod. They simply just go together. In recent years, their horrendous service and general incompetence has served as inspiration for skits and jokes. We've seen it in plenty of late-night shows, stand-up bits, even on TikTok and YouTube. I mean, you're watching this video right now after all. Although there is a certain level of truth behind some of the jokes. In this case, a lot of truth. Spirit Airlines being torn to shreds in the media is nothing short of justified. In 2015, Spirit Airlines carried out what they labeled as a State of Hate survey. This survey was more dedicated to gauge what people disliked about flying as a whole. However, it ended up showing that roughly 8,000 people disliked Spirit Airlines above all other airlines, despite there being a decent reward for taking the survey to begin with. Even prior to that, in early 2014, Spirit Airlines was reported to have been the most complained about U.S. airline, according to USA Today. In 2009 to 2013, the United States Department of Transportation was said to have received 3 times more complaints per passenger when compared to their competitors. I think it's safe to say that despite Spirit Airlines being as huge as they are, with over 192 aircrafts in the fleet and servicing over 70 destinations, they fall quite short from being labeled a prestigious airline. I'm not one to say things without any proof, so I'll lay it out there. In early 2018, they came in at 9th on the top 20 list of America's most hated companies from USA Today. The American Customer Satisfaction Index did a survey and they received a meek score of 63, whereas the industry standard was 75. Has this terrible reputation always been the case though? Well, to answer that question, we'll need to rewind the clock a bit and dig a little bit deeper. It's not all that simple. Spirit Airlines was not always an airline company. While they were always in transportation, they started out as Clipper Trucking Company way back in the 60s. Then they became more focused and specialized in the delivery of automotive parts in the 70s. After that picked up some speed, they managed to get into the tourism and entertainment industry in the 80s, specifically charter planes, which would fly to the most popular destinations around the US, like Vegas and Atlantic City, mainly for the gambling degenerates to be fair. At this point in time, they were known as Charter One Airlines. Little did they know when the 90s came around, the direction of the company would ultimately change forever. They managed to build up a whole fleet of their own at a discount due to the state of the struggling airline business at the time. They saw that there was a gap in the market and took it. This was also when they happened to change their name to Spirit Airlines. They started small, but it seemed that they were bound for success. They were the new face in town and even managed to transport over 100,000 people in their first year. With a few tweaks and adjustments after their initial success, they managed to scale up to over 1 million passengers a year. Not only that, but they expanded to all sorts of different locations as well outside of just North America. During this exponential wave of growth is when the problems started piling. Maybe it was a prediction for the future. In the summer of 1994, they had actually overbooked flights and 1,400 of their passengers' tickets ended up being canceled, despite already being paid for. The reason for this? Spirit Airlines failed to communicate properly with travel agents, and the tickets ended up being invalidated completely. This wasn't the only hiccup they had during their early days. In the year 2000, they actually received a fine from the Federal Aviation Administration of $67,000, which would be about $113,000 today. The reason for this fine was because Spirit Airlines had violated federal regulations for seat markings and placards. On top of that, there were inconsistencies found in the demarcation of things such as passenger seats, storage areas, doors, and even emergency equipment. Good luck finding anything if something was to go wrong on the plane. Up until this point, all the people who had flown with Spirit Airlines had been satisfied with their procedure, prices, and customer service. However, it was still a relatively unknown airline in the industry. They hadn't started to undercut their prices by a ridiculous amount yet, or implemented any serious strategies that set them apart. Nor did they have any controversies for them to gain a bad reputation. That was until the ownership of the company changed hands. A few times. and finally landed with a venture capital company called Indigo in 2006, which seems to be where the start of their problems, or rather, their bad reputation, begins. Like all companies, they require a business strategy in order to increase profit margins in order to please the stakeholders, and that requires them to do some things that don't always please the customers. This is the precise reason that many family-owned companies never want to franchise, because it's all about the money. The first business strategy that was implemented by their new CEO, Ben Baldanza, implemented fees. Now, you might think that hidden fees are simply a part of life, especially when it comes to airlines. Although Spirit Airlines really takes it to a whole new level. Baldanza decided to transition the airline from your industry standard airline to an ultra low-cost carrier. What this essentially means is that everything, and I mean everything, is sold separately. While your tickets would most likely be extremely cheap, it did not include the price of your luggage. They even went as far as to charge for carry-on luggage as well. The fees didn't stop there though. You would need to pay for online check-in, priority boarding, cancellations, changes to your tickets. There was a particular case back in 2012 when a Vietnam War veteran who was terminally ill with cancer had attempted to cancel his ticket, but was never given a refund of a mere $197. It was only after the veteran drew massive media attention that the company eventually gave him a refund and issued a public apology. They did also make a donation of $5,000 to the Wounded Warrior Project in his name, which in all honesty isn't that much considering that their operating revenue for that year was a whopping $328 million. This begs the big question though, what was the reason behind all these sudden changes? Well, the answer is pretty simple. It's the business strategy. They're driving up the profits for the shareholders, trying to make them happy and keep their pockets full at the end of the day. It doesn't matter what the customers want. All that matters is that they manage to lure people in with a deceptively low-priced ticket and then sucker punch you with hidden fees. Fees weren't the only way that they managed to really boost their profit margins. Another one of their strategies was to cut costs as much as possible. The most noticeable for customers being how little space they get when they actually fly with Spirit. Their planes mainly come from the Airbus A320 family, which has a ridiculously high seat density. They wanted to be able to fit as many people on the plane as possible, which at the end of the day also sacrifices comfort and legroom. It wasn't just the passengers that were being given the short end of the stick, it was their employees as well. In 2010, almost all of their pilots went on strike and brought their business to a screeching halt. The pilots believed they were being paid significantly less than other pilots from competing airlines. The matter was settled not long after, but it still speaks volumes to how little Spirit Airline cares about people as a whole, be it in the company or the passengers that are flying with them. Spirit Airlines doesn't seem to shy away from their bad reputation in all honesty. If anything, they seem to lean into all the bad press they get, specifically with their advertisement campaigns and promotions. Usually their advertisements and promos are really offensive or dark and happen to coincide with recent tragedies, controversies, or disasters. Their most notorious one being an advertisement with the slogan, "Check out the oil on our beaches," which was in 2010. The same year as the BP oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. The controversies didn't stop, almost like the Energizer Bunny that kept going and going. Remember when flights were barely happening during those crazy pandemic times we barely got out of? Well, it just so happened that in July of 2020, a passenger of Spirit Airlines had passed away due to COVID. While Spirit Airlines claims they had contacted the Center for Disease Control, there was actually no record of any contact taking place between the two. All the other passengers were completely unaware they had been in contact with someone who was infected, and they were also not informed afterward. Crazy, right? It seemed like Spirit Airlines' days were finally numbered, not because they were running out of people to, let's face it, essentially scam, or underpay, or lie to. After all, people still needed to get places on a budget. But believe it or not, other companies were still interested in merging with them. The first company was another ultra-low-cost airline by the name of Frontier. They seemed like they would be the perfect match to merge with, and the initial bid was set at an already high $2.9 billion. But like all things with Spirit, money mattered most. Frontier was outbid by JetBlue for a whopping $3.6 billion to acquire Spirit. Talk about a high price. And just like that, Spirit Airlines was no more, at least in name. After a filing with the Securities and Commissions Exchange last year, they are on track to merge by no later than the first half of 2024. This would make JetBlue the fifth largest airline based in the United States. While their motto is, "At Spirit Airlines, we go for you," I think we can all agree that this is just absolute nonsense. They started out as a simple trucking company and managed to transform themselves into one of the most hated companies in America with their hidden fees, poor customer service. Hell, they don't even have a toll-free call line. you have hidden fees there as well. You simply cannot win when it comes to Spirit Airlines. But at the same time, you can't beat their prices. What do you think about Spirit Airlines? Have you ever personally had a flight with them where you had to suffer cramped spaces and absurd fees? Let us know in the comments down below. While you're at it, remember to drop a like, subscribe, and turn on those post notifications.